Okay, I think we are live. Sorry for the delay there. It takes a little bit of time for the restream to populate on YouTube, and I haven't quite got the timing correct. So, wanted to thank everyone who has taken the time to join me here this afternoon. Um, this is another round of the H1B Guy Live, unedited, unscripted, covering H1B, S386, and more. And so, if you haven't already, I'd like to ask you to please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube. It helps me to continue to produce more content like this for you. I'm trying to still figure out the live streams and the correct timing for that. I know we've had a lot of success with the 8 p.m. on Eastern, but I still want to do some shorter during the workday around lunch. I know a good amount of my subscribers and followers are in Pacific time. So if you just let me know what time do you think is best? Definitely need to do it around sort of the mid lunch time here. I'm on the East Coast. Definitely helps me to get the rest of my day going and figured out. But I wanted to say we're very close to another milestone here on the H1B Guy channel. So if you haven't subscribed, I'm going to ask you one more time to please go ahead and subscribe. If you can hit that like button now, it helps with the algorithm of the live streams that are currently out there in YouTube. So today I wanted to start. I saw a meme, and I'm going to read this because I didn't memorize it, but it says, I saw this meme yesterday. It says, so in retrospect, in 2015, not a single person got the answer right to where do you see yourself in 5 years from now? And, that was just, I thought, kind of interesting. If you think about a normal interview question or just a life question in general, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I will tell you, I didn't see myself blogging and doing these raw, long form video essays on YouTube as part of my daily life in my career path. I just didn't. I was still managing an immigration program, 5 years ago that was had over 40 plus resources working for it. And so, just how quickly life can change for us, as we've seen through this pandemic. But I thought that was pretty interesting. So, I wanted to run and start with the Twitter Q&A. I missed one from last week in the live Stamp It Out with Rational Woman that we had last week. And so wanted to just post this question. I'm going to try something new. I hope it comes up on the screen. Okay, so here we go. This question was posed last week, and I skipped it, and I apologize to you here. And I wanted to bring it up because I think it's important for us to talk about. And the question is how can we form one alliance and fight for one cause instead of separate groups, which shows we are weak? Was how the question finished. I think that's a tough one, right? It just is. Ultimately, you have to be organized, and if you're not organized, you're going to pay the price for it, right? I think we've seen some groups out there, immigration forum at hashtag #ImmyHelp. I've had an opportunity to interact with a couple of the guys over there and just appreciate them reaching out to me and what they're trying to do and their voice. But you've got to understand what they are and what the Greencard Backlog Coalition is, right? We're talking about very grassroots efforts. We're not talking about small PACs or super PACs with large dollars to influence political agendas. So I think the answer is organization. And it's finding sort of the right organization that can receive the right funding. As we've talked about, it's all about the money. And so you've got to be able to have the money. The money is what influences the vote, right? And so I think that's it. If I could give you any advice, it's that organization, under sort of one voice. I think those are two good starts: Immigration Voice and the Green Card Coalition Backlog, or Backlog Coalition. I'm sorry if I'm mixing that up. I do apologize. I don't have it in front of me. But they're the ones that are doing the Dalka Kid videos, which I think have a pretty strong message. If you've watched any of those and seen it, I know they have a YouTube channel as well. So yeah, I think supporting them and starting there would be my advice. Um, so this wasn't a question, but I did want to post this one. Um, so Annie, I just want to thank you for your support. You've interacted and asked me questions over the last week, and I just really appreciate it. Um, you're a world traveler, right? It's very clear in where you've come from and being here and where you're going, right? And so, thank you for your words and you just offered. There's so much going on with this H1B visa. It's really hard to keep up to even know what questions to ask. But thanks for everything you're doing to bring awareness. And that's was one of the visions of what this platform and this channel was supposed to be. I wanted to be a voice for those that don't have it, and I wanted to help talk about what's going on that a lot of people aren't completely aware of. Um, there was an article that I came across today from uh, I think it's where home is on Twitter that shared a Pew Research article, and I'm definitely going to cover that more on Friday. But it talks about the numbers were like 78% of Americans support high skilled immigration. But then when you dive down further into the article, it talks about the number of immigrants currently in the U.S. with college degrees, and I think the number was like 36%. I thought that number was pretty low. I thought that honestly it would be closer to 50%. So thought that was interesting. And Pew Research just does a great job of nonpartisan reporting. Um, so this is from Raj. Raj, thanks for your question. And you ask, will EB2 India priority date move forward in the upcoming October visa bulletin? And Rational Woman and I had a chance to talk about this last Wednesday in the Stamp It Out Q&A. Uh, my answer was I don't think it's going to. And you look at the dates, which, we're talking July 8th, 2009 for EB2. And so that is anyone who has a priority date that was certified on or after July 8th of 2009 in EB2 is currently in the Greencard backlog. And when you look at the numbers of who that is impacted in effects, right? You're talking about 800 to over a million Indian nationals currently in this country. I'd say 75% of those are working under H1B visa. Um, so, I mean, a very large percentage of the population, as it relates to high tech, high skilled, right, is sort of in this limbo gray area, right? And we've talked about the circle and the cycle of the circle and what that creates. And so if it moves, I'll be surprised. And if it does move, I don't expect it to move by more than 4 weeks. So I wouldn't expect anything to come out of 2009 unless, I could be wrong, we see a very large jump. What would a large jump look like? We've seen those in the past. We've seen them go up several months to a year or two and then scale back because of the numbers, the percentages. But I just think if we're looking at 7% cap, right, for country of origin, I don't foresee those numbers moving a whole lot. Okay. So any idea what is next you see for S386 in the Senate and what lies ahead? This is something that we started talking about last Monday, when we covered will S386 pass by the U.S. Senate. And I think pass is, I don't know if I guess that's the right term. I mean, you're talking about unanimous consent, right? So that's 100 yeses. It can be blocked by one, right? So that's kind of where we are, the 99 yeses and the one block, right? Or right to object, I think is the actual legal terminology, right to object to unanimous consent. Um, as I've talked about, going back to the first Stamp It Out Q&A with Mad and Witty, and his wife, we talked about, I don't think that S386 is going to pass based on where we are right now. I just think if I read between the lines of what happened with Senator Durbin's delay, and then the bipartisan agreement, and then Senator Scott, as you've heard me use the analogy, WWE off the top rope, with the Rosetta Stone Amendment, right? I think that when we look at those dominoes, it points to me that the White House doesn't want S386 to move forward under unanimous consent. Um, I'm hopeful that based on a lot of the other signs that we're seeing out there, that they may be pointing to a merit-based system, but I don't foresee that happening anytime soon, and definitely that's not going to happen under executive order. So, Ashwini, I wish my answer was different, but will it hit the floor? Possibly. But I think based on the op-ed piece that we saw from Senator Rick Scott in the Miami Herald last Monday, he's not going to remove his objection to it. So I expect S386 to die in the 2020 term. I wish that wasn't my opinion, my prediction, if you will, but unfortunately, that's just how I see it. Okay, Aki, you ask, what about the changes to hashtag H1B proposed by DHS and sent over to OMB? Will it be applied and will the courts allow it? And then your follow up to that. Expect heavy lobbying from ALA, IT Serve, NASCOM, and ILK against the rule. Most of the articles talking about this change mention very clearly that DHS will lose it in the courts anyway. Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the lawsuits that have happened, there was, USCIS was sued over the employee-employer sort of definition and designation. I think you continue to see lawyers challenge these rulings because of the double standard that's being created. These memos that are being put out, they're not law. They're interpretation. And so ultimately, I think that that's where the issues come in. What I thought was very interesting about the posting that went up last Thursday, and hat tip again to my Instagram follower Bian Vidula who sent me that article from Bloomberg Law that I covered yesterday. Really kind of contemplating what does H1B reform in the form of this proposal mean. I think we look at what it means. It means really the death of the third party. IT consulting services and IT consulting companies who are utilizing third party corporate core type candidates as part of their staff augmentation, I think are going to have a very difficult time gaining approvals when you look at what this scrutiny is and sort of the reform around it, right? So this interpretation that we're going to continue to hire the best and the brightest, but we're going to do so to make sure that the employee-employer relationship is clearly defined and that outplacement isn't happening. Well, here's the problem, okay? The problem is that large enterprise companies use consultant-based staffing, right? Contingency staffing, okay, as their means to fulfill large enterprise projects. Specifically, when we look at digital transformation and agile, these are new initiatives that come and go, and they do so with temporary contingency staffing. And a lot of those openings are high skilled, high tech, and there is not enough of the US American worker to fill it. So if you're going to restrict these third party consultants that work under an H-1B visa through corp-to-corp arrangements, right, through their employer, through staffing firms at large enterprise organizations, I promise you that the pain will be felt. And it'll be felt at that large enterprise level where the time to fill that ratio will be astronomical. And so then what will happen is that they'll begin to looking for alternate means to fill that gap. And what does that point to? It points to offshoring. So who benefits there, right? A lot of the target's been on the Indian integrators. But now when we start to look at what this means, if we're going to restrict H-1B talent and the inflow of that into the U.S., well, we're going to have positions that are sitting here in the U.S. that go unfilled, and enterprises, small and large, will be forced to offshore. So at EV Guy says, what kind of reaction response with this executive order will we see specifically from third-party staffing firms and or American businesses that rely on them? Again, you look at what I just said a couple minutes ago, and I wanted to bring this one up just to highlight the point, which is there are parallels that are built in terms of what the circle is, right? And so those parallels are staff augmentation, specifically in the late 90s and the early 2000s, exploded with the tech boom. It just did. But that is what has become necessary to fill these large enterprise contract based needs that the American workers don't necessarily have either the skill, okay, or the volume, meaning we don't have enough of them. All right. And we go back and we start looking at, okay, advanced US advanced degrees. We've had this conversation. Only 20% of full-time students enrolled in STEM in the United States is here from the US. So that means 80% of all advanced degree students enrolled in full-time college classes for a master's degree in STEM or higher are out from outside the US. Now, while we may be graduating enough bachelors, we're talking about advanced degrees, right? So again, those numbers are what they are. Only 20% of US born students that are enrolled in full-time STEM for higher learning, right? Masters or higher. So very interesting to see that. But I think if we see some sort of executive order around H-1B reform, it'd be very interesting to see where it's put. If you look into the posting, it specifically is addressing Title 8. Title 8's been discussed a good bit here on this channel in some of the comments if you want to go back and look at the videos. But I think what you'll see is a change in the language to Title 8 through an executive order. What that looks like and how that's interpreted by the courts is really, I think, a huge question. But it's very clear that President Trump's administration is looking to really tie up some loose ends heading into this election. Loose ends meaning immigration reform and what that looks like. So that is, I just want to go check. I think that was all the Twitter questions. Let me just double check. It is. And so I wanted to ask you, we're kind of halfway through the stream here. If you haven't already, to please like this video. If you're not subscribed to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, click the bell for notifications. But just by liking this video, it helps me with the YouTube algorithm of all the live streams that are currently out there and getting this message out to a broader audience, which is really one of the goals here for the H1B Guy channel. I want to make sure that awareness is raised and that individuals who are unsure about something that is so detrimental to the success of our economic growth here in this country, that people are educated on it and that they understand both sides of the debate, right? We've been talking about the presidential election a good bit here on this channel. I saw something, I think it's 55 days until the election. So as you can see, when we talk about, tying up loose ends, the current administration tying up loose ends and charging sort of into 2021 and what that means, I think that when you say, hey, we're 55 days away, I looked earlier, the debate schedule, September 29th, October 15th, and October 22nd. So literally in the next 6 weeks, we will have several debates that are going to happen. I'm really curious to see, how immigration, the H1B, green card backlog, how that comes up into these debates going forward. It's going to be really interesting to see. You're really talking about two radical sides, extremes, if you will. I mean, literally, these two guys are on the extreme ends of immigration and what it looks like and what's allowable and what's not. I want to be very clear with you, though, about both candidates, and that is when it comes to employment-based preferences, both seem to take a pretty stiff, iron fist to it, right? They will definitely, talk about how it's good for the economy, good for job growth, but you won't see their actions and behavior back that up. So I want to get to some of the YouTube questions that came in. Abhijit, thank you so much for joining the stream. The last few streams we've had, you've been a part of it. Really appreciate you joining this community here. Thank you for taking the time to post a question. So, wasn't the Senate supposed to commence this week on the floor? When will the next S386 discussion start? Yeah, I think I read, that yesterday was the first day they were back in session. It's supposed to go, I believe, through the end of the month, beginning of October. I don't have it in front of me. I'm not a political analyst, so I apologize on that. Unfortunately, immigration and what I do and what I talk about has become very political. And I can't say that I don't enjoy the conversation around it, but so they started yesterday. I would expect if S386 will be called back to the floor, it'll probably be sometime next week or the week after. But again, even if it is, and this is what is so tough for me to get through to you guys and how American politics works, which may be different than where you're from, your country of origin, and that is this. When we're talking about unanimous consent, right, that's not an actual Senate floor vote, okay? What it means is that unanimous consent requires all 100 U.S. senators to agree to move the bill forward without a Senate floor vote. Okay. So that's my best non-political analysis on what that means. And so if you go back to the op-ed piece written by Senator Rick Scott last Monday on the Miami Herald, he has no intention to remove his objection, and I don't think he'll unblock it. Okay. Now, could that change in a week or two if the White House comes calling and says, hey, we've done our review, we've had more time, we understand the impact, and we're ready to move forward? Yes. But I don't think you're going to see that. I think what you're seeing is the White House wanting to punt on S386 and wanting to potentially, foreseeing that they will be reelected in November, potentially looking to, further restrict H1B visas and hopefully the implementation of some sort of merit-based system. President Trump's been very adamant about that, going back to his 2016 campaign. And we saw that, again with the Cotton Bill in August of 2017, but we haven't seen much of it since. So let's see. Neon et al. 123. Why media, press, journalists, politicians single out H1B when problems exist in all other visas as well as in the green card's distribution, almost 10 times the size? I mean, that's a great question. I think when you look at what it is, okay, and that is going back to the late 90s in the early 2000s, when the H-1B visa numbers were increased significantly through like 2002, you're talking about 195, 225,000, were the numbers. And I think you had a lot of people that didn't agree with that, but it was law, right? AC 21. Um, and then you have 9/11 happen, and 9/11, created an economic recession, and there were a lot of jobs lost. And so when that happens, and you look at the influx of immigrants, right, and the types of jobs that were lost, they don't correlate, but it becomes an easy scapegoat. And unfortunately, racism exists. It exists in black and brown. Does. It just does. And you've heard me talk. I don't like that word. I don't know what other word to describe it other than some of the derogatory terms that are out there to describe Indian nationals. I think you've just seen this prejudice to where have we been beat? We meaning the United States and the tech space. And I think it goes back to the pipeline, right? Uh, Science, engineering, technology, mathematics in the Indian education happens a lot earlier and a lot faster. I think only now have you seen the American education begin to adjust to technology, and hopefully that's a great sign. I hope it is. I didn't learn to type on a keyboard until I was in high school. I was 17. Like that just can't happen. And so I think that when you look at those problems and what they create over time, it creates a skills gap. And so that skills gap then is correlated to cheap labor because it's on an immigrant visa. And so you had a lot of stories in the mid 2000s and continuing on. I mean, there's evidence out there of employees that trained their H1B replacement. There just is. Agree with it, deny it if you want. It's out there. But what I'll tell you is what's really happened is that a lot of jobs have become redundant due to automation. And unfortunately, it's been American workers that have been impacted because of the skills gap, because they're not current, because they haven't stayed current with technology. And I think that across the board, that's the difference in the Indian culture. Now, this whole argument is totally around IT. Well, let's not forget the MDs out there that may be watching this stream, the dentists out there, the ortho surgeons, the gastroenterologists, okay, um, the anesthesiologists that are here on H-1B visa, okay, that are working in rural hospitals because there aren't enough medical staff. I posted last Friday in the news, which I thought was a very telling article about the number of MDs requested, who's requesting them, and their compensation. Um, and so the H-1B just isn't IT, and I think that is one of the sort of myths that needs to be busted here is that it's just not coders, it's just not programmers, right? It's professors in the middle of Iowa teaching advanced education, right? Technology, even. So we have to bridge that gap. Unfortunately, uh, those that are anti H1B are going to continue to be because there's a prejudice involved in it. When you throw out facts and data, which are H1B visa holders working for employers here in the US create American jobs, it's always dispelled with the I trained my H1B replacement article from 10, 15 years ago. So thanks, Abhijit. Appreciate your support. Yeah, I mean, you've heard me on this channel talk about merit-based immigration, and as I've really done a lot of thinking and meditating on it, what's the fairest reform for us? Like it or not, it is merit based. It's based on your skill. It's based on your education. It's based on the uniqueness, your specialty knowledge, not necessarily a job description. It's just not. Now, can you get a job and can you earn? Right. I mean, I think those are definitely things that have to be part of the equation. But I think when you look at the systems that are in place in Canada and Australia, going back to that Pew Research article we talked about earlier, it talks about Canada and Australia, the immigrants in Canada and Australia have the highest amount of degrees. Okay. So what's the commonality there? They're both merit-based systems that put weight on degrees and education. They just do. See if we have anything else. There was a lot going on Twitter that just literally sometimes you have to scratch your head and wonder what's real and what's not. But here's what I know, and that's this. With prevailing wage determinations that are happening, the skill level 3, 4, 5 jobs that we see out there, the cheap labor debate isn't real. Where do we see the cheap labor debate more? I think that's in the OPTs, the OPT STEMs that are freshly graduated, and I don't mean desperate in a negative way, but desperate to begin working, right? Because that time clock, as soon as you get that EAD, that card in hand, that time clock starts ticking. And it's a ticking time bomb, because if it's just an OPT EAD, it's good for 12 months. 12 months from the date of issue. Not necessarily even the date you got your card in hand, the date of issue. So then you start looking at OPT STEM, and that's another 24 months. And so the race is on for them, right? And so they're willing to accept less to get their foot in the door and get working, potentially even looking at sponsorship. So I don't think that the import H1B, and import meaning somebody that's located outside of the U.S. that obtains an H1B visa that comes here to work, you're generally not going to see those salaries below $75,000. You're just not. And if you do, those are outliers, and they're working in very rural areas where probably the median salary and the median wage is lower than it is in some of the major metros. Yeah, H1B crisis becoming humanitarian crisis, people dying in backlog. Yeah, you're right. There was uh, another one last week, and see if I can find it. Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but there was another H1B, I think, that passed away in the U.S. And it's like the third in a month, right? Whether he's in backlog or not, you just look at, if we can be kind and nicer to people, treat people with respect and love, and understand that the common goal is that we live in an amazing country where we have the freedom to speak out like I am right now. I have this huge platform, right? I don't have a lot of subscribers, but I have a lot of you that are messaging me words of support, acknowledgement, and thanks literally daily. I I had 5 WhatsApp texts yesterday from people I've never talked to before that messaged me there, and I just want to say thank you. They're saying thank you to me, giving me the opportunity to say thank you to them, because I really appreciate your support. I couldn't do this without you. I couldn't do this without the support of my family that I have. Um, Hi, mom and dad, if you're watching. Mom, I hope you're feeling better. Um, but it goes back to, what is it that I love to do? And I love to help people. And when I started this channel, I didn't know that this was going to be the direction that it was going to go. But what I can tell you is that um, we have a problem. We have a big problem in this country. And it's a problem that not a lot of people are talking about or aware of. And it's sort of one of these things that, just as the cliche and the analogy goes, we sweep it under the table because we hope it goes away. But it's not going to go away, because the circle continues and the pipeline continues. So until we put our foot down and decide that we're going to make reform for the better that's mutually beneficial for everyone, we're going to continue to have this problem. Yeah, again, the OPT is one of these very interesting work visas, right? And what it is and what it creates. So here's what universities don't want you to know, right? While they may be nonprofit, it's all about the money, right? So if only 20% of full-time enrollees are US. That means that 80% are from outside of the country, are coming here spending their money, right? I wouldn't imagine that very many OPT or F1s are getting very large advanced higher learning scholarships. Um, but again, I have come across some very sharp folks that came here, got their master's, worked under OPT, worked under an employer who was willing to sponsor them, and they've been here in the US 10, 12 years. And guess what? They have an I-140 that's 5, 6, 7 years old, and they're still an H1. And so what happens is it creates a natural pipeline, right? When you designate 65K for those located outside of the US, 20K for advanced US master's degree cases, okay? So what numbers become easier? That 20K, right? Because the pool of those, generally those applications that we look at, you talk about over 200,000 applications for each HCAP lottery. Well, let's separate that. About 175,000 of those are for folks located outside of the U.S. So the odds of getting an H in in the advanced category, right, the 20K category, are much higher. So that's why the pipeline is created, and is it abused? Yes, but I also can tell you a lot of success stories out of it, and folks that are very productive contributors to society and wouldn't have been able to do so if it wasn't for the OPT path. Yeah, I mean that's the question, right? Hopefully there is another option that comes up here. Again, I don't think um, that the H1B needs to be eliminated. I just think that what the H1B is and how it's defined as dual intent needs to be clarified. And I don't think that you need to restrict third party based consultants. I just don't. I think that you need to allow enterprises here in the US to have as many options for staff augmentation as they can. Let's keep the jobs here, because if we don't import high skilled talent, those enterprises will look elsewhere. All right, so Abhijit, I'm going to read this to give you an example of prejudice. H4 has been called cheap labor as well. My wife on H4 is working at a bank as a mortgage specialist, and the bank still hasn't been able to fill all vacancies. Yeah, that the interesting thing about the President Obama's executive order on the H4 is how it was met, and that is, I remember personally, and if I did this to you and you're somebody watching this, I'm sorry, which was to say, yeah, H4s are cheap labor. Do you know why H4s are cheap labor? Because they haven't worked here in this country ever, okay? Unless they were on an H1B that expired or was denied or something. That's one. And second, the last time they worked, 3, 4, 5 years ago in some cases. And so what that created is this: the H4 EAD had full autonomy, meaning they could work for whoever they want. In your wife's case, a mortgage specialist, she could serve tables at a restaurant, she could bag groceries at your corner store. But what that created though is that this all of a sudden, in May of 2015, you had several thousand applications for H4 EAD work authorization that then were approved somewhere, in the 60 to 90 days that followed. And you had thousands of H4 EADs now. And I hate to say desperate for work, but really just looking to work. And so willing to take less money as part of that. And I think that that's what created that H4 cheap labor debate, right? Is that lower skill, less money, not necessarily a status earned on merit, right? So when you look at Australia or Canada and how their merit system works, there's actually a weighted scale for the spouse. And if you go back and look at the video where I talked about, my good friend who decided to leave the H1B life in the US for the merit-based life in Australia, his spouse was a big part of his points. And the reason that she was is because she is high skilled, master's degree, computer science, technical. And so, yeah, I mean, I think when you look at that, if we want to end the cheap labor debate, it has to go back to merit. It just does. The only way to continue to regulate it further is higher scrutiny on the prevailing wage determination, as we've seen from the DHS posting. They're going to scrutinize that prevailing wage determination. And how do they do that? They're going to do that through audits, providing pay stubs with financials. So the government, ICE in this case, is going to come knocking. If you employ H-1B visas, be prepared to produce those financials. Do I think S386 or similar can pass in next in 2020 or next 2 to 3 years? I've gone on the record, as I said last Monday. I don't think S386 will pass in 2020, unfortunately, and it will die. Do I think something is likely in the next 2 to 3 years? Yes. I think if you look at all of the dominoes that are happening right now, what the pandemic has given the administration is an opportunity to really tighten high skilled immigration, temporary foreign workers, like tighten the restriction on it. They've done that through the travel ban, right? As you can see through some of the H-1B reform that's being discussed, they're looking to really define the employee-employer relationship, define specialty occupation, and also add some additional language around the prevailing wage determination and the prevailing wage pay to make sure the H-1B workers are being paid a fair wage. See, the problem is, as an H-1B worker, when you're not paid a fair wage, a lot of times you don't feel like you have the power to speak up, which is not the case. If you're being legally wronged, I would advise you seek legal advice and understand what your options are. But to answer your question, no, I don't think S386 is going to pass this year. I think it will die. Do I think we'll see something in the next 2 to 3 years? I sure hope so. Perfect case scenario would be address the green card backlog, H-1B reform, and some sort of merit-based system. So I've gone for about 45 minutes here on the Q&A. I have got one last little rant that I wanted to cover very quickly, and that is I saw something on LinkedIn that really just made me just laugh. I'm not going to cover who wrote it and who they were talking about, but it was about job descriptions. And so I wanted to talk about job descriptions very quickly, which is job descriptions are written by human beings. Sometimes they're written by HR, sometimes they're written by hiring managers. But what happens is when an agency gets a job description, a lot of times they'll just cut and paste and post it out there, and you'll see 3 or 4 agencies with the same job description. Well, I can tell you that any account executive that cares at all about their client is not going to be lazy and just funnel it like that. When you see those are generally VMS based postings. They come out, they go into a system, they're quickly scrubbed, and they're pushed out. Waste of time. When you see a job description that maybe has 3 or 4 paragraphs as an intro and 3 or 4 bullets as responsibilities, that'd be something that I would jump on. When you see a job description that basically is like 5 different jobs in one, asking for 10 to 12 years of experience for this, or 8 to 9 years of experience for technology that's only 3 years old, good luck, right? Because what that is generally just something that just was pushed through. I will tell you that the great debate around job descriptions is this. When you look at filing perm labor or even sponsoring an H1, whether that's an HCAP case or a change of employer case, a job description has to be provided, and it must be pretty detailed. But really, what does it come down to? You need this individual to be able to do 3 to 5 things. And I can tell you that I've provided job descriptions in the past that were a paragraph and 5 bullets that had the education requirements, that had the 5 years of experience requirements, that had the specific technology, and it still wasn't considered a strong enough job description. So what that creates is cut and paste. And that isn't necessarily fair to the employer or to the employee. But why do we do it? Because the government has told us that we need to, that there needs to be a minimum amount of requirements, meaning the technology, the skill, and education, in order to have evidence that's sufficient enough to validate the need for the request, for the petition. So that's my quick rant on job descriptions. Not all job descriptions are created equal. A lot of them are pushed through automated systems and they're never even touched by a human being. Unfortunately, that's just the digital transformation age that we live in. My best advice to you is if you see a job you're interested in, reach out to a recruiter who can explain it, that may be working for that organization in a better sense. Especially if it's something that you're interested in, if the money aligns, the position, the role, the responsibilities, can't hurt to reach out. So that is going to do it for today's live stream. If you are interested in more news surrounding not only the H-1B, but immigration benefits as a whole, work authorizations, third-party consulting, check out the H1BGuy.com. If you think that your employer or that you could benefit from any of my consulting services that I offer, work authorization, third party process, audit, compliance, recruiter training, I'd love the opportunity to speak with you and see how I can help you. I think that I want to wrap up here by just mentioning that tomorrow I'm really excited about what we have coming out. Look for a post. Is the H-1B EAD the answer to ending the H-1B debate and the green card backlog? If you would like this video, I just really would appreciate it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube. It helps me to continue to produce more content like this for you. If you like this live stream, let me know in the comments or shoot me a direct message. If you have a preference on a time that maybe works better for you or your thoughts around the 1 o'clock Eastern, maybe every other Wednesday, would really like to hear from you. I'm also looking for individuals that would be interested in coming on the H1B Guy Live Stamp It Out Q&As, and I'm looking for individuals that would be interested in participating in a Stamp It Out Q&A panel with potentially 3 or 4 others and myself moderating. If you're interested in doing that or participating, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you, talk from you, get to know you, and see if it's something that makes sense for you to participate in. Thank you for all of those who are watching. I just really appreciate your support, taking the time to tune in to the H1B Guy here today. The H1B Guy, your global source for all